All right, here we are. We are looking at Oliveira versus Clem from the round of 24 of IEM Katowice. This is a series that was played on the second day of the tournament. This was the first game of these two players, and let's get into it. Let's see how this one started up, how this one shook out. All right, so first game was on what would be the MVP map of the tournament? Gresvan. For now, something interesting that we saw throughout this tournament is that a lot of players in TVT were a lot more comfortable going for stuff like one racks expands, greedier plays overall. Now, since this was the first game of the tournament and a lot of the players were feeling each other out, makes sense that they both opened up double gas. They both played defensively. They both, I believe, let me double check this. They both skipped the SCV scout. Yeah, Clem did not SCV scout. Oliveira did not SCV scout. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. Both players mechanically very good. They've both been practicing. Well, Clem is just kind of a natural. That's not to say he doesn't practice, but they both are just very, very strong players overall. And they're both highly effective players. Okay. As we start things off, we've seen both players open up 3 Reapers, 1 Hellion. Now, we do see an interesting deviation from Oliveira. So Clem, he does this a lot. I think this is a cool little mix-up in this setup where Oliveira knows Clem a little bit. I think. I don't want to read too much into it, but I'm pretty sure that's the play. So Clem, whenever he goes 3 Reapers, if it was going to be 2 Hellions, it's almost always going to be a Widowmine defensively instead. But in response to this, if you do a similar opening where you open 3 Reapers, you can cut the second Hellion and he goes straight up into the Cyclone. So Oliveira just starts off with a very small tech advantage because realistically, this Widowmine is probably not going to be able to get too much done. Now, we do see, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, because I didn't cover this game live, I believe that Oliveira tried to bait Clem with this. Look at this. He goes in, he sees the Widowmine, he knows it's here, and he is looking to draw the army to the front so that he can jump into the main with those Reapers. So a nice little attempted bait from Oliveira. Clem, though, he's like, okay, this is a little too sus. It's a little too sus, and Clem, he doesn't chase too far. Oliveira not going to be able to get the opportunity, but it was a nice little attempt. Beyond this, even though Ravens were nerfed going into IEM Katowice, they're still very good units in the early game, so it makes sense. Oliveira cuts Marine production initially in order to get this faster 3rd CC, and I like that. I like that overall. We'll keep an eye on things as we kind of move forward. Clem is going to start to move out here with these first couple units. And Oliveira, so this is a really nice read from Clem. He's like, where are your Reapers? They're supposed to be here. He moves down to the left to look for them. He knows that there should be more here. Oliveira could have potentially had an opportunity to jump at the main base, but Clem, he kind of checks that move. So just a nice little defensive play. And just shows that, Clem was really thinking nicely. And in fact, he actually now is like, okay, well, if you don't have anything there, you don't have a proxy starport, you don't have something weird, you don't have those Reapers hidden, I'm going to take advantage of the feature of Gresvan. I'm just going to run into your natural. Up until this point, the game is very even. This is a great little play. And this is enough to 2-shot SCVs. Clem, by the way, with a really nice move where he clicks down the further away SCV instead of going for this one. Oliveira responded almost instantly, but Clem finds himself 3 workers. Really nice little start. Not a huge lead, but hey, he builds himself a little lead. Now, Oliveira's like, okay, I'm gonna find these Reapers, I'm gonna kill them. I know that they're here. And if Clem can get any value with these at this point, it's going to be a surprise. But Oliveira says no. pulls back this one Reaper, gives himself the opportunity to maybe find some equalizing damage. So, you know, just a little bit of micro coming in from both sides, but good showing from both players. Clem did, of course, get his own third CC behind this. Kind of fine. He does get faster into the second and third barracks. Something, now, okay, we do see Oliveira went into one more Raven than Clem. So 3 Ravens to 2, so he's going to be looking to try and take advantage of that a little bit earlier on. But Clem, he did not do a quick Viking play. He did not put his starport onto this reactor and say, I want to take control of the skies right away. Whereas Oliveira, well, he's actually doing the same. They're both just using their starports as reactor factories, as it were. Reactor producers for the moment. For now, not a whole lot happening. Scan comes down from Oliveira. He doesn't see too much. Now, a lot of what Oliveira's success was in this tournament is he was very aggressive. A lot. He was very in his opponent's face. By the way, Reapers, those Reapers that I was talking about earlier, they actually slip into the natural during a big push. Great grenade. He gets, I think, 1 worker. Clem did respond pretty quickly. But Oliveira, yeah, he's able to trade out one of his Reapers that's pretty much useless for 2 SCVs. Gets a little bit of lost mining time. Just a nice counter move here from Oliveira. Clem, though, does have the faster 1-1 upgrades. Faster stim. His second and third barracks were quicker. Overall, though, this, based on what's happened, it's likely that this game is going to go into the mid game. Or even into the late game. And I mean, you can see from the timer that that's probably going to happen. I really like this little setup here. Just want to give a little nod. Using those Reapers. Cyclone does clear one of them out. We've got Clem with a nice Widow Mine on the bottom left. Just some overall nice stuff from both players. You don't want to throw too many Marines into, you know, spotting in the early game. So just using those leftover early game units is just a great choice overall. Now, they're still not building any Vikings, which is quite interesting. And at this point in the tournament, this is literally the first TVT of the group stage. There had been a bunch of TVTs in the round of 36, but it was still, this was the first TVTs that these two players have played. So it was still very much like, what's the situation? Now, Clem, his armory was a little bit late, and I think that means that Oliveira is able to catch up on the upgrade timing just a teensy bit here. It's not a huge deal. Well, actually, sorry, it's not a huge difference, but it is a very big deal. Anytime you let your opponent kind of catch up, not exactly the best. Did you see Oliveira's post IEM stream? I have not yet. I've not had the opportunity. There we go. Second factory coming on in from Clem. Same time from Oliveira. Now, yeah, once again, fourth command center similarly timed. They even both do basically the same move, which is where they send their first, like, and this is something we actually see a lot of throughout this entire tournament, is I think even it happens between Maru and Byun. They both sent like their first medevacs and first smattering of Marines up to this little area. And it's funny that it started here and continued basically all throughout the TVTs for this weekend. Good job with the Widowmine here, but also good job from Oliveira to not, you know, run into it. I think, actually, hang on. Did the Cyclone get pulled back? Yeah, the Cyclone got pulled back from Oliveira, so he was able to save it. He actually has 6 kills on the Cyclone. Overall, there hasn't been too much that's happened just yet, but a lot of posturing, a lot of checking each other. Oh, that's a big Widow Mine. I forgot about that one. So he actually didn't see the mine initially. And because the armory was done, Oliveira had to spend a scan. So nice job from Clem setting that up there and getting some good dividends early on. Both players go into their +1 vehicle weapons, which is not a big deal, but it's the +2 vehicle weapons that's the big deal. Because with +2 vehicle weapons, you're able to one-shot stimmed Marines, which is huge in Marine tank versus Marine tank wars. Obviously, that's assuming the Marines have combat shields. If they don't have combat shields, well, I mean, the game is kind of irrelevant because it's not being played at the highest level, you know. So it's kind of a janky setup. Now this is where things start to get a little bit of deviation. So Oliveira gets into his Viking production a little bit faster here. Clem scans, sees there's only one siege tank out in front of this base, and he scans the third base as well. You can see he's kind of posturing. Oliveira gets drawn out a little bit too far. Scan does track the opponent's army, so they're just keeping track of each other. Oh, I forgot about this too. Oliveira accidentally clicked down one of his own tanks. But overall, this is still relatively small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. This is not going to decide the match. Clem is faster into his additional command centers, and he's also now doing something that is going to be a mainstay in TVT most likely, which is instead of going into the mass starport right away, getting the 3 additional barracks. Now, this is a big decision point in TVT these days because it is telling everyone that you're going to be focusing heavily on Marine production. You are going to be wanting to really push the limits of your opponent. And you're going to be wanting to be aggressive. Clem, by the way, tries to load up into a medevac drop. This is a really funky engagement right here that's about to happen. I remember seeing this one and being like, whoa. Because Clem kind of gets jumped on. Oliveira knows the army is here thanks to this sensor tower. Oh, wait, no. No, he doesn't. No, it's his siege tanks. Okay, no, he knows the army is here because he sees it with his eyes. So I was looking at the siege tank that was... or no, that's the Cyclone siege tank? It is the siege tank. Regardless, he sees this army. He doesn't know that this army is up on the top side for Clem. So it ends up with like a really messy engagement. Clem sieges up his tanks. Oliveira has his Marines super clumped up on the left side, and he's not prepared for this flank from Clem. Now, this is a really interesting setup because we can see that Oliveira has Ravens ready to go, but he's not expecting this flank. He thinks he just jumped a good portion of Clem's army, when in reality, it's kind of him that gets jumped a little bit. So it's like a very disjointed engagement to start things off. And unfortunately for Oliveira, a lot of these tanks are blocking this concave of Marines from crushing this. So Clem, while it starts off not great for him losing these Marines, he ends up getting the surround on his opponent's army and jumps the tanks of Oliveira. There's only 2 tanks right now that are not interference matrixed. Matrixed? Oliveira does get down a couple of interference matrices of his own, and that allows him to prevent this army from being completely obliterated. And now he actually clears out his opponent's Marines. So this is a weird fight with multiple stages to it. So now that Oliveira has cleared up this army, he can actually get over to this position. And funnily enough, this siege tank is actually working. It's literally a net negative for Oliveira. Just funny because of how the engagements broke out. But something as well to note, no auto turrets, not a single auto turret being dropped because of how heavily they were nerfed. We might see one getting thrown down right now because there's just enough energy, but no, he doesn't even have the time to do it. These medevacs, though, actually end up saving Clem a little bit because it's the Marines that do it. The tanks for Clem end up getting some big shots on these Marines, and they're rather distracted. Ultimately, it ends up with a really messy engagement, but it is going to be Clem who will come out pretty far ahead once these... Well, we'll see it as the engagement kind of wraps up. But as all the tanks kind of wake up from their slumber, it looks like a crushing victory. Oliveira, though, very clutch little move with this one medevac. He lifts up some of the Marines, drops in on top of the tanks, and is able to take down a few of them and prevents Clem from kind of running away with the game. Actually, this one siege tank on the high ground getting some big shots as well. Clem goes a little bit far forward for it. Something else that ends up being a pretty important moment in this game, too, that allows Oliveira to stabilize here, is the Vikings. The The Vikings have their damage point buffs, so they're able to get a couple of medevacs on the way out. Oliveira, this was such a scary moment for him, but he actually manages to stabilize, and then he does something that is an excellent decision in the situation, which is going into Liberators. Going into Liberators means that even though he's down in tanks by, 4 tanks, because he's got air control, he's going to be able to zone these tanks out. And if Clem is continuing to push, he's going to be running into a bit of a brick wall. Regardless, Clem, he gains a momentum initiative, a momentum advantage. And because he's playing this heavy Marine style, it's actually super good for him that he's able to do so. As well, he's gone up to the additional command centers first, whereas Oliveira doesn't have any of those. Clem already trying to secure his 5th base. It's still a relatively even game, but it is Clem with a small advantage. Both of them, though, get up to the 3-3 at the same time, start their +2 vehicle weapons. So they both, cross their T's, dot their I's. And it's very clear that they're both playing quite well. Now, Oliveira recognizes that Clem is not ready to take a fight just yet, sneaks in, snipes a tank as it's sieging, and loads up and gets out, only losing 1 Marine. And it's really the only reason he lost it is because it was kind of lagging behind. But a very clean little move from Oliveira. Nice job. Clem. Now, this is a situation that is not exactly ideal for him here. So he moves forward into an opponent that is setting up Liberators. You can see he sieges these tanks. He's going to try and snipe down these Liberators, and I think he does get them. He gets at least one of them. No, he gets both. So a good coverage right there from Clem. Actually, yeah, that like kind of prevents this from turning into a disaster. As well, Oliveira was hoping those Liberators would not get sniped. So he's still building Vikings right now. So he's actually a ways away from getting more Liberators out. So that's actually a really clutch snipe from Clem. And now that allows him to really start taking control of this position with tanks. He's not in range of his opponent's command center yet, but he's going to knock out the sensor tower. And he's once again just taking some solid trades. But Oliveira, he's absolutely staying in this game. It's very clear that this was like a brawler match. Like, this was a great little match here. Ooh, yes. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. Okay, little drop tries to move out to the right side. Oliveira sees it. Clem drops just out of range of the scan. Very nice. Meanwhile, we've got a double drop coming up to the top side. They're both just trading blows at this point, but Clem is making a big move to the left side. Huge move to the left side where he is going to look to potentially just knock his opponent maybe out of the game if he can get a kill here on this command center. Oliveira, of course, does have the air control. Significantly, Clem's not even contesting it at this point. He's not even building more starports. He's going for it on this heavy Marine tank setup. So if Oliveira can, stabilize, add on more Liberators, it's going to be really handy. But he actually doesn't have, he has 1 tank here. So this is a pretty tough situation for him. And he loses the command center, loses the tank. It was a cancel, so good job from Oliveira. But it's an uncomfortable position at the very least. And I think Oliveira, he loses this command center. I'm not familiar. I don't remember exactly. Nice little drop on the top side. Going to try and deny some mining. But Clem is really starting to take both a macro lead and a positional advantage in this one. Wisely, though, gives up the base, doesn't try and contest it for too long. Now, it's now 5 bases to 3. Oh, and Clem, I forgot about that. He even caught this medevac. It's very clear that Clem was playing very well at this point. Both players were playing quite well, but Clem has the initiative. He is in the lead. He even sets up. This is such a nice position that he unlocks because now he can siege this gas at the natural, which, of course, TVT gas is, it's a huge deal. Even though they're both pretty much maxed out and they're both on big banks, you don't want to lose any of your mining, especially after you've already lost, a lot. Clem, meanwhile, moves in on the top side. He's doing really It's just a phenomenal job of keeping the pressure on and keeping on top of his opponent. Oliveira is adding on Ravens, and Ravens are still very handy in this matchup. Like I said, you don't want to go mass Raven. You don't want to go up to like 15 Ravens. But, you know, a few Ravens in the late game is still going to be very good for disabling tanks. Anti-armor missile is going to be very handy. Big Doom drop into the main base. Well, not even a Doom drop, just a triple drop. Although I think he actually loads up these tanks and goes in as well, which is honestly such a great move. He could have maybe thought, Clem that is, could have maybe thought about dropping into the natural, but he only had 2 medevacs. I think he maybe could have dropped a couple tanks up here, but it's a little bit dangerous, and he's already probably going to want to focus on this location. Does fly into one of the missile turrets, so a little bit of a miscue right there. But what does Oliveira do? Instant counterattack, which is honestly such a like bold decision given the game state, because he could have easily lost right here. Like it could have been so easy for him to lose right here, but a very bold decision to go across the map. And I actually don't even remember how this plays out, but I think it ends up working out quite well for him. Also very fortunate that Clem was not able to target down his upgrades. Because if Clem denies 3-3, I mean, it's going to be a disaster for Oliveira. But Oliveira, he finds Clem like super exposed, takes out multiple command centers. So he recognizes that Clem has too much army on his side of the map, on Oliveira's side of the map, because he knows that there's, like, count up the supply. That's 7 tanks, that's 21 supply. 2 more medevacs, that's 25 supply. That's a bunch of Marines. That's, what is that? This is basically almost a 50-55 supply army here. This was like a pretty close to 30 supply army here. Oliveira, maybe he was doing the math, maybe he wasn't. Regardless, he makes a snap call to go across the map and says, I need to get some damage done. Drops the interference matrix, gets in on top of his opponent. Now, if Oliveira could have recognized that these tanks were exposed, he might have been able to jump them. But, like, there's so much chaos already happening. Meanwhile, Clem is making the other move, which is to say, I'm going to try and camp your production, and I'm going to try and end this game. That's going to be really difficult to contend. But Oliveira, big find right here. He finds 4 of Clem's tanks that were trying, I think they were trying to run home. They were in the medevacs initially. They were trying to run home to, I think, aid with the base trade. But Oliveira is able to take them out. He's going to get a lot of the medevacs with his air control. Clem, not able to kill the natural expansion just yet. He's cleaned up in the main. Oliveira doing an excellent job of stabilizing a horrible position. And Clem has actually spent basically all of his bank at this point. Like, this is kind of just a wild setup. Like, the game has gotten super weird at this point. Oliveira, though, he's able to get in on top of this production when there's no tanks here. And this concave for Clem, if Oliveira drops an anti-armor missile on this, he's going to shred these Marines. They are in such a bad position right now. And there it is. Clem also move commands a bunch of this army. Oliveira actually pulls back at a moment where he could have potentially just, like, crushed a bunch of Marines. And it's, once again, there's so much going on. Oliveira is literally in the process of potentially losing the game at home. So you cannot blame him for this. And he gets knocked down to... fortunately, he does save this command center, but he's focused on, like, I need to salvage as much economy as I can because I'm losing a lot. Because he knows that Clem has the top side. He knows that Clem has this. Also, I do have to be a little critical of Clem building extra command centers right now while his main is under threat of being camped. Like, this game could have ended potentially right here in favor of Oliveira if he had killed off these Marines and, you know, kills these tanks. He can possibly camp the production and end the game right here. So Clem dropping these command centers, it feels a little bit dangerous. How many Okay, he still had a lot of Marines queued up on these barracks, so he's like he's still producing a lot of units, and he's still got money for the next round of production. By the way, thank you very much for the 450 bits online strategy DK. Appreciate it very much. Hey, for the additional 200 bits as well. Thank you. As it stands, the siege tank that pops out for Clem ends up being his saving grace. So the fact that Oliveira was so pressured on the other side of the map, but the pressure that Oliveira is putting on forces Clem to let this command center live, So they're both like taking advantage of the fact that neither of them can look at everywhere at once. Still, this little choke almost ends Clem's day right here and now. Well, not ends day, but like, look at how much these Marines are struggling to get anything done. And once again, these are stimmed Marines getting shot at by +2 siege tanks. So the siege tanks are massacring them every time they take a shot. This tank for Clem really does save his bacon. Is there Raven energy here for Oliveira? Hey, thank you for the additional 200 bits as well. Thanks for the content. It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure, genuinely. This Raven actually had energy for the anti-interference matrix. If he could have found the attention to drop an interference matrix on this tank, he maybe could have iced the game out right here and now, because I think he kills both factories. Like, this was a game where Clem was almost about to win straight up, and Oliveira just recognizes the game state, makes a brilliant decision to go for the counterattack straight up the middle, straight up the gut, and finds huge success with it. Now, unfortunately, right there, a rare misclick. We won't see many of these in his entire run, but he does click on the unbuildable bricks for a little bit. That actually means he doesn't, like, he could have killed one of these factories. He could have gotten some good work done. Still, he's gotten a lot of damage to Clem's infrastructure. He's killed off a lot of command centers. I think, yeah, this factory does end up falling. Clem, though, look at this. He did save these SCVs from earlier. He barely lost any workers during all this. That is amazing that Clem was able to save so many workers. And it really helps him a lot. But he still hasn't cleared his main base, which is a big problem. Oliveira is potentially about to get pincered here. He's lost most of the Marines with this army. He's resecuring his bases, which is very good for him, but he doesn't have a lot of mining that he can even set up for. And funnily enough, this siege tank is like if there was a medevac or something that could provide high ground vision, it could knock out so much mining. But I don't think that ever ends up coming into play. But it's just like there's so much chaos happening right now. And this is a bit of foreshadowing of what's to come. Even though this actually goes very well for Clem, notice that this cleanup is a little bit rushed, just a little bit rushed. The Marines kind of sprint in from the side. I understand that he doesn't use the medevacs to lift up the Viking, or yeah, he doesn't use the medevacs to lift and drop on top of the tanks, but this is a bit rushed. And he could have done stuff like lifting the starport, but this is just, this game has been intense type of moment, you know? Regardless, it ends up being a pretty darn good cleanup. Oliveira, though, very wisely, instantly gives up the position with the Vikings and Ravens, and he's like, no, I need to get the hell out of here. I've gotten everything I could with this, and I need to leave right now. Oh, wait, Clem, hang on, what? Did he? Oh my God, I thought he was gonna land at this base. Oh, that's so sad. I thought he was gonna land at that base. But yeah, this tank, 19 kills for Oliveira, or for Clem. Without this tank, Oliveira maybe never gets cleaned up and maybe wins the game right here. So like this tank for Clem ends up being super clutch. So good job. Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Both players are playing at their limit. They are really, and they're not just playing at their limit, they're pushing each other to the limit. Like really, really forcing a lot out of each other. And good job from Clem, like during this moment to siege this tank. Oh man, if he could have dropped this command center right here, like landed it, that would have been so helpful and might have ended up being the difference maker in this game. All right, so here's that cleanup once again. Like I said, Oliveira, good job pulling back these Vikings and Ravens. Really clutch stuff. But now Oliveira recognizes, he sees this with the medevacs that, by the way, he sent home earlier to avoid the Vikings, or to avoid the Marines and just get them out of there. Finds his command center, gets the pick off. That's a really nice find. Now, Clem, he did lose 1 barracks, 1 factory. And note that he does not rebuild those very quickly at all. Specifically, the second factory doesn't get rebuilt. Can you beat time? Obviously not. Obviously not. Have you seen Oliveira's analysis of his own playoffs? I have not yet. I'll probably take a look at it. I saw the synopsis of it, but that's pretty cool. Okay, back into it. We do have the... So I was actually wrong about this on the broadcast. +3 vehicle weapons is really not a high impact upgrade. Yeah, time is Oliveira. Yeah, they're the same person. Okay. This is now a situation where things are really scary for Oliveira. Where are his tanks? He's got 5 tanks, 1 in the main, 2 rallying forward, 1 at the third, and there's 1 here with this army. It is not sieged up. This is a really scary moment. So he needs to use his Raven energy extremely well to have a chance here. So that anti-armor missile to start things off is really nice and helps him out a lot. Because Clem, if he knocks out this final base, like that, this is something that on Grezvon we're going to be probably seeing a lot of in TVZ. But in TVT, I mean, the same rule kind of applies. This base controls so much space. It really, it just gives you a really strong anchor point. So it's incredibly important that he holds this position. Clem, I mean, it's nice that he's able to knock out that gas, but he wants more. However, because he doesn't have air control, and how many command or orbital commands is he on? He is on 4 orbital commands. And that's where these orbital commands being rebuilt actually is like pretty important for him. Because he did need scans a lot. And even though he's up, 20 workers, he's been ahead in income for a decent little portion. He's actually not mined that much more than his opponent. Army size graph is, I mean, it's very even. These players, once again, they're playing at absolutely peak form right now. Like, they are really, the fatigue of the tournament is not set in. They're fresh. They are raring to go. And this was a foreshadowing of the level of play that we were going to see at this tournament. This position that Clem takes, so difficult to deal with without Liberators. With Liberators, you just park a Liberator right here. It's going to knock out like 4 of these tanks, like not going to be a problem at all, even without range. But unfortunately, Oliveira has not yet gone back into Liberators. He's still building Ravens, which he's already kind of at the point where they're at their limit of value. But once again, this is the first game that they're playing on the new TVT setup. So they haven't really, they're still feeling out what new TVT feels like. And there's no way that they practiced against each other leading up to IEM Katowice because they had to play each other in the group. So it's highly unlikely that they played one another leading up to this tournament. By the way, Clem, great little move here. He spots that Oliveira is moving down to maybe try and flank these tanks from the south, and he just sprints forward into this position. He scans, sees that there's no tank here. But does overstay a little bit. Actually, hang on. Did Clem might not have identified where his opponent's army was during all this. I thought he did. I had thought that he had. Okay, yeah. He scans here, sees the army head to the south, and sprints up to the top side. And if he just snipes this tank and gets out, it's a really good play. Even the sensor tower. But you can see he digs a little too deep into the cookie jar, tries to get the Raven, tries to start moving forward into the bottom army, and kind of loses a lot of these medevacs. Once again, that Viking damage point buff ending up being pretty impactful here. Regardless, they are once again still very even. Sensor tower gets sniped down. Good job from Clem. Like, so the whole game, even though we can see that the supplies have been even, it feels like Clem has been, aside from this one big move from Oliveira, which did a lot of damage and really kept him in this game in a huge way, it feels like this game has been Clem in the driver's seat for like the entire time. Even though Oliveira has stayed toe-to-toe and has stayed evenly matched with him, it feels like Clem has been in the driver's seat and Oliveira's been on the back foot. And now he really starts to open things up. He finds this tank, finds the Raven, and I think he even kills this command center. Oh, no, I forgot about this. This was a pretty nice moment here. Huge moment for Oliveira where he gets the repair. He distracts his opponent. Clem could have sniped that command center, and it doesn't seem like much, but we have to remember that the mining for Oliveira was very slim. This was a huge moment in this game, saving this command center. A clutch repair, and he gets back just in time. And I think this command center ends up surviving for the rest of the game at this point. So a super clutch save. Couple Marines just kind of checking on things. And I think they missed this Doom drop. Well, it's not even a Doom drop. It's just a triple drop, but I think they missed the drop. But this depot, I think the depot spots it, but look at how quickly Oliveira turns. So fast in response. Clem, meanwhile, I mean, this is now a nasty position where once again, Oliveira finds a medevac. Clem with the quick hands gets one of the tanks out, so good job. But Oliveira really gives himself a huge boost with this drop in the main. And whenever things are tricky, whenever things are really tough in TVT, it is hard to know what the right way out of it is. Counterattacking can be very good, but this was a very nice counterattack here from Oliveira, and I think it lets him kill like a ton of production. And once again, Clem committing all of his forces on the other side of the map, not being prepared for a counterattack. There's like nothing to defend. He's got 2 tanks and a couple of Marines, but the tanks even like sprint forward, and Oliveira is just like, okay, I need to kill production. And he gets so much work done with this. Clem, once again, this is a similar situation as how he tried to break this before. But before he had overwhelming numbers. This time, once again, kind of rushes in a little bit. And once again, I want to draw attention to that because that's happened already once in this game, and now it happens again. And it's entirely possible that Oliveira was looking at that. Meanwhile, great decision to target down the reactors. They have so much less HP than the barracks, but it's effectively like you've killed the barracks. It's very good. Now he gets some good trades. Even still, will ultimately get cleaned up. And I think even the medevacs actually know that, wow, they do actually slip out. Probably weren't meant to, but regardless, that like takes a lot of pressure off Oliveira, but it doesn't yet equalize the game. Clem still has a big he still has a big bank. Now, what did happen there, which is a pretty big deal, is that the starport went down and Clem did not replace it. He replaces one of his factories, but look at also where he's building his production. He lost 2 more of the barracks. He lost a reactor. Like his main base is kind of in shambles right now. And at this point, it's great that he's expanding to the top side, but that's not where he needs to be focusing in terms of like keeping things secure. Like if he takes this base, gets a sensor tower here, and just builds missile turrets, he doesn't have to worry about the counterattack that just happened to him. He can like put that out of his mind, basically. Instead, he kind of continues to expand his, I use the term influence very loosely here, but it's his influence in the top side. I mean, it's just planetary fortresses and sensor towers, but the more relevant point would have been maybe locking down this bottom side. Still, hard to give any crap. He was still mass expanding. It was still a busy, hectic, intense game. But once again, kind of an interesting situation. Well, very interesting situation. This was a ludicrous game. And these medevacs, they kind of are funny because they actually give Oliveira some unintentional scouting information and lets him see the whole army coming. Once again, I would have loved to have seen Oliveira going up into Liberators at this point. And this is something that we did see players like Maru, players like Oliveira later in the tournament, Cure, and even Spirit doing as they kind of figured out new TVT a little bit more in the mid and late game, is going for more of these Liberators. Because of the nerfed cost, because of the nerfed utility, I say nerfed cost, but because of Liberators costing less, because of Ravens being overall less valuable than they used to be. They're still good, but once again, they're not as amazing. Now, this is a really great anti-armor missile here. This engagement looks very promising for Clem. Now, kind of looks like the kind of engagement you really don't want to go into. Especially a couple of interference matrices drop in the back for Clem. I remember casting this and thinking this was maybe going to be the end of the game in favor of Clem right here, because he just had so many tanks. And we knew that Ravens were nerfed, but it ends up being a really nice setup into the fight. I think 5 tanks get disabled here. Almost the entire army gets anti-armor missiled. Even though it's now only -2 armor, that's still a big deal. Now, there are still these 4 tanks on the bottom side, and they're really not accessible for these Ravens. But, well, as I say that, actually, he does hit a couple of interference matrices. Meanwhile, these Marines kind of getting bottled up a whole bunch. And this looked like such a bad fight, once again, on paper for Oliveira going into it. But he manages to turn water into wine with this one. Clem lets himself get kind of bottled up a little bit. And now, as the fight concludes, Clem, his tanks wake back up, but he's about to lose 2 on the left side. And the Vikings are going to be ready to land on this. And there's no starport yet. Just now, 2 starports are being rebuilt for Clem. Just now. But Oliveira, he thinks about landing the Vikings, I think. But he's like, it's 3-3 Marines. I can't. So this was like a critical moment where it's hard to say what would have happened. It probably would have gone well for him if he landed the Vikings. But this was him showing a ton of patience by not landing them. He's like, okay, I did enough damage to your army that you won't kill me right this minute. And I still have air control. However, if I try and clean up everything, maybe you flood in another 12 Marines behind this, another 10 Marines, and I end up losing air control, and then you slowly squeeze me out of the game. So this is actually, whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision, this is once again foreshadowing some amazing patience out of Oliveira and just a really fantastic showing. Now, all the Ravens did go down, just about all the Ravens, but they kept Oliveira alive. They kept him alive. They allowed him to take an engagement that was really good. And now Oliveira, now as the tanks unsiege, they're a little bit closer together. Now he's like, all right, this is my moment to land the Vikings. And it's actually a perfect one. And they slaughter these siege tanks. So Oliveira really picks his spot there, shows a lot of patience, and deletes those siege tanks. Deletes them. And he's babysitting these Vikings so effectively. And now he's actually up 25 army supply. Even though Clem has been outmining him heavily for the last like 3 minutes, Clem, once again, kind of rushes in, thinks maybe the game might be over, that he's maybe going to be able to initiate a game-ending move, and ends up losing a lot of stuff and a lot of momentum. And Oliveira, like, I think Oliveira really surprised Clem in this game. Because this was... I looked at this. I remember casting this game with full vision and thinking, like, keep thinking, like, oh, man, Clem's about to win. Clem's about to win. Clem's about to win. But Oliveira did such a good job of, like, staying in it and giving himself a puncher's chance. And if we look at the production tab, we've got 2 Vikings, 2 Ravens, 2 siege tanks at a time versus a lot of Marines, yeah, from Clem, but only 1 tank. Only 2 medevacs, no reactors. Clem could have maybe just built the starports on top of these reactors, but like Oliveira's gotten, Clem has gotten more like hammer blow damage done. Oliveira's gotten more precision, more like, I don't even know if precision is the right way to put it, but he's gotten more relevant damage done, more important damage done, you know? And Oliveira, once again, he shows an excellent understanding of his position in this game. He can't just go kill his opponent, but he can continue to use his advantages, which is the Vikings, the Ravens, the air superiority overall. And he scans. He's like, okay, where are your Marines? Gets the jump on one of his opponent's tanks. And now, because he puts this tank in the mineral line, he's able to mass repair it. Now, is that dangerous? A little. Because those SCVs, you do not want to lose those. And he does lose 4 of them. But, hang on. I think he microed back the SCVs here. I wanna check this because I remember thinking like, oh my god, he's gonna lose like 15 SCVs. But, oh wow, the splash damage randomized a little bit, so he actually didn't kill all of them. Regardless, though, the mass repair, very clutch. Meanwhile, Clem, once again, it feels like he thinks his opponent is on the ropes. So he is like, okay, I have to kill you. I'm about to... Or not even I have to kill you. I'm about to kill you. But Oliveira, he's been able to just keep pumping tanks. And that is such a great decision in this position. Especially against a player whose aggressive tendencies can really get the best of him sometimes. Clem, he's just continuing to pump out Marines. Yeah, he's now back up to 2 tanks at a time, but he is focused on ending this game. And Oliveira is just continuing to take small, good trades. Let's take a look at the number of tanks lost. It's very even, and it's, man, so many Ravens have died. But, oh my god, look at the medevacs. 31 medevacs have died. Is that 31-1? Wow. That is a difference that I have never seen before. That is wild. Clem didn't make Vikings. No, he did not. And he just kept feeding medevacs into the meat grinder. Honestly, I mean, that's 6,000. Wait, no. What is that? How many resources lost difference is that? Just from the medevacs alone. Is that 6,000? It is 6,000. Yeah, 6,000 resources lost difference just in medevacs. Jeez. $19 Ravens lost, though? Yes. Yes, the Ravens lost is big, and that's why the resources lost is still, like, pretty close. But there's also, I mean, if you take a look at it at this point, there's over 100 more Marines that have died for Clem. 3 more tanks. Obviously, these couple Liberators is different, and the Vikings is different. But, I mean, that is a lot of medevacs lost in the course of the game. Also, more command centers. Well, only 1 more, apparently. Interesting, because 1 planetary, 1... But Clem also built a lot more command centers. it feels like Oliveira just played a more technical game. And now Oliveira's going to start to move forward. Clem, once again, he's built more barracks. He's just been so under the gun, even while he's being aggressive. He has been, you know, pumping... He's been pumping Marines off of unreactored barracks. And he's gotten himself back up to 13 barracks. So he's basically on the setup that he was on before, where he's able to build 2 medevacs, 2 tanks, and 16 Marines at a time. But it is super inefficient. No reactors here. No reactors on... what? How many barracks that don't have reactors? 10. 10 barracks that don't have reactors. Another medevac goes down. Yeah, air control is just going to be so much more important in this matchup. And Oliveira, like, he's just gotten so much value out of the Vikings. There was a really long time that Clem's economy could have allowed him to get just a lot more value in, like, he could have gone for an air transition. And now at this point, Clem's got to be scratching his head like, how are you still in this game, let alone now pushing me? And it's a more technical army out of Oliveira. Takes down 2 of the barracks here. He finds... now, Clem does find a Raven, I think. Oh, no, Oliveira even saves it. Oh, my God, he even saves the Raven. I really should have looked at this series and been like, Oliveira's on like that. He's on that next level, you know? And this is another situation here where Clem sets up for what's going to be potentially a big flank. Hey, you think you're much up a tree for the raid? We got another big another situation where Clem sets up for a big flank, and Oliveira, he spots it and he's like, no, and he chases it away. And once again, this is all building to one big moment that is going to be taking place in about 2.5 minutes. Nice job right here from Clem. And look at this. Look at this. He tries to get in on top and collapse on top of the army, but Oliveira is already moving back. He's already moving back. This is a potential, like, huge surround. Oliveira gets his way out. Meanwhile, there's actually a moment here where there are 4 tanks that have a combined, like, I don't know, 50 HP, and they all fly over some Marines. And Oliveira, he needed to get out of here very quickly. Like, once he recognized the trap he was kind of in, getting out of here has got to be priority 1. So once again, you cannot blame him. What is that? 13 HP on this one medevac, 36 on the other. Clem might have had an opportunity to snipe down these medevacs, but how do you know that there's tanks inside them, first of all? Still, Oliveira escapes. He escapes potential doom in that situation. So just a really nice, successful disengage, and the fact that he guards his army and guards himself, and then also makes a nice defensive setup on the other side to prepare for what is going to be a counterattack is so impressive. The whole time, Oliveira's been on a shoestring budget. He has been getting outmined in the biggest, like, Clem has had so many more bases than him. It's just an amazing defensive performance so far from Oliveira to even be in this game at all. Clem, he's like, okay. And you can tell Clem is maybe starting to get antsy. Like, he is like, I have to, like, I can't let this game go on too much longer. That's what it feels like. We know that Clem is actually on a huge economy. Massive monster economy. By the way, great Liberator here from Oliveira. Just gonna deny some mining. Super cheap way to do so. And he'll even get a few SCVs with it. Clem, though, he's like, I gotta get on top of your production. Oliveira, he did have a nicely placed tank here, but it's just, it's a tough position that he finds himself in. Like, how do you clean that up and also defend at the front? And he's been so broke for so long, he needs this base on the bottom side. Fortunately, it is actually the main command center, so there's no command center to be killed there. But there's gonna be 2 points of inflection here. One, this army in the main base, and two, this army pushing at the front. Oliveira is, it feels like he's about to get checkmated. It feels that way. But he doesn't rush this, drops the interference matrices, looks at this army for what it is. Okay, you've actually only got 2 tanks here. This is scary, but this is also a lot of army supply that you kind of have trapped up here. I have the air superiority. The Vikings are jacked now. He's already killed 33 of his opponent's medevacs. He's like, okay, I don't need to be too scared of this. And he doesn't, he's going in with urgency, but not frantically. Anti-armor missile, shredder missile, hits the medevacs. He could have even thought about maybe getting a, he could have thought about maybe even getting a couple of interference matrices on these medevacs, but that might have been a little bit too greedy with his Raven energy. I think he reapplies the the interference matrix on these units. Still, the push at the front is scary, but the planetary is going to buy him time. There we go. Reapplies the interference matrices. He knows he's going through a tight choke. And look at this. He's just setting up his Vikings for success, making sure, hey, they're going to get as much damage done to this army as possible. Does drop the interference matrices on these medevacs now, and gets another one. And we see like the first auto turret dropped in basically the entire game. And it actually does, you know, provide some value. And now, once again, Oliveira has turned what is a horrible position into an amazing, clutch, clinical defense. This was the first game of the tournament. We actually didn't know what we were looking at initially. But this is like, this is so damn impressive. And Clem, like this is Maru at his peak levels of defense here. Now, Clem, he is still making huge progress, and he actually kills a ton of SCVs right here. Oliveira, fortunately for him, hadn't lost a critical number of workers up until this point. Did these Marines? No, it looks like they didn't get any kills. But he hadn't lost a critical number of SCVs at this point. But at this point, he's now lost another 14 more. He was on, what, 50, mid-50s? But he cannot afford to lose this base. Interference matrices come down on the tanks. Good job from Clem. Once again, shows that he is playing excellent StarCraft 2. Even 22 and a half minutes into a slugfest, he still gets the unsiege as the interference matrices come off. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent stuff. And even now, sets up these siege tanks behind for a little bit of a mini ambush. He's ready to potentially crush this army. And this has got to be one of those moments where you're in the game and you're thinking to yourself, like, surely he has to die now. Surely he has to, you know, surely he has to die. Surely he must be on his last legs. And so you set this trap as Clem. And Oliveira, he takes a bit of a bloody nose. It's not that bad. He's able to disengage once again. And at this point, he even gets one of his opponent's tanks that's a little bit far forward. Clem even gets baited in a little bit to a couple of siege tank shots. Ends up what could be a game-winning situation for Clem, where he gets a huge ambush through these sight blockers. Ends up being a negative trade for him once again. And at this point, you've got to be like scratching your head like, how do I solve this guy? He's playing so well. I've mined so many more bases than he has. Clem is on, what is this? Okay, let's count up the bases. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bases against a player who's been locked down on 5 forever. Just now has mined his first minerals from a 6th base. you've got to be like scratching your head and going crazy at this point. Like, this has got to be getting under your skin. How can you avoid that? As good as these players are, once again, they are only human. So Oliveira, he knows at this point that, like, he has got to start doing something. He is no longer at the point, because he's lost all these SEVs and basically all the bases that are under his control are pretty close to mined out. He's got to start doing something. He can, of course, transfer some SEVs down to this bottom base, and that's going to give him a little bit of refreshed income. But what is a great maneuver? Attack to the bottom side. That'll cover that base and maybe let it get up in mining. Meanwhile, Clem tries to push in with what could be a move that will now checkmate his opponent by camping the production. Oliveira, though, already has these 2 siege tanks in position. Like everything about this is just so impressively done. And yeah, Clem, he'll break through, but he's lost most of his Marines. The dream of camping production is now dead. Meanwhile, Oliveira has snuck his army down to the bottom side. Clem doesn't actually know where it is just yet. And there's not enough SCVs to repair this base. He has to cancel the command center, which... And another thing I didn't mention too much, Clem actually doesn't have, like, barely any gas in the bank. He's only mining a little bit of gas at this point. He's only got this base mining gas. It's about to mine out. This one mining gas, but not even fully efficiently. He's only mining from 3 2/3 geysers. Whereas Oliveira, he's actually still mining from an equivalent or greater amount of gas. Actually, yeah, he's on an equivalent amount of gas mining right now. Technically a little bit more. That's like the ebb and flow right now. Actually, wait, oh, no, never mind. This was mining gas. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's pretty close. It's pretty close. And the army is actually a little bit more technical, actually a lot more technical right here for Oliveira. Yeah, the 8 Ravens, they're a pretty big difference maker here. In this command center, no chance it's going to get saved. But Oliveira moves into and look at this. Look at these scans are brilliant. He knows that there could be a flank coming on in. He knows that there could be a flank, and if he's made reads based on how Clem has played so far, Clem is going to want to try and flank this army and cut it off, kill it from multiple different angles. And that is what he's going to angle for. And that is, if Clem executes it correctly, it's almost certainly going to work. And I don't know how Oliveira would prevent that. Now, this is the big moment we've been building for. In this entire game, this entire breakdown, this is the moment. So Clem, he's going to knock out these rocks. Does actually lose a couple of Marines during all this. So already, things not going exactly according to plan. He's got to boost his medevacs away, even though he actually doesn't need to. There's only 3 Vikings here. They're not even threatening anything. But he boosts away because, you know, he's been under the gun for so much of this game. This has been such a high-stress game. Clem, though, he is setting up for an iron ring that he is going to put around the neck of Oliveira's army, and he is going to squeeze until it is gone. And there is not a whole lot that Oliveira can do. But what has Oliveira seen from Clem? He's seen a rushed break on the main base. He's seen another rushed break on the main base. He's seen an attempt to flank this army, which Oliveira escaped out of. And Oliveira has been fighting and punching his way back in this game in huge ways throughout the whole thing. But you look at this setup, and it feels like this is about to be checkmate in favor of Clem. It feels like his hard work, his throwing units at the wall has finally paid off, and he is getting to the promised land. But what happens here? Oliveira, he recognizes that there's a little small part of this flank that is a little bit exposed. So what does he do? He goes after it. He puts in what's called a spoiling attack in war, which is where you know your opponent is planning something, so you preempt the plan by getting in and attacking and just disrupting their move. And Oliveira, I think this worked better than he could have ever possibly hoped for. Because Clem right now, what he should be doing is he should be sending a big force of Marines, maybe like 24 to, yeah, probably 20 to 25 Marines down to this bottom side. Maybe a tank with it. Maybe, you know, load up a medevac. Because if he scans and looks at this army and really looks at it, he knows there's only 3 Vikings. Yes, there's Ravens. They can interference matrix the medevacs, but that means they're not interference matrixing tanks. That means they're not dropping auto turrets. They're not dropping anti-armor missiles. They're using their utility to potentially, you know, no effect. The other thing, Clem can bluff that. He can bluff that, pretend he's loading up a bunch of medevacs, and just boost them in. And then Oliveira has a tricky decision to make. But Oliveira has already kind of put a little bit of a rush order on Clem. Now Clem, he scans the army. And this is a really crucial moment. He scans the army and he sees the Marines are super out of position. So what does he do? Instead of a methodical, slow, I'm going to crush this on my own terms, he pulls the trigger. And the Marines, instead of setting up and going down this ramp, which is going to be potentially an easy clear, we can see the army supply is heavily in favor of Clem, while the army value is a little bit in favor of Oliveira. The tanks are everything here. The tanks are so much of this. Oh, the Ravens, a lot of them are, they're eating up a lot of this army value, and it's going to be difficult to get army value from this. But Oliveira scans and recognizes that Clem is going. So he sprints back with these Marines, gets back in position, buffers for these tanks, while Clem has turned what should have been a 3-angled flank into basically fighting from one side. And now the siege tanks, they're all sieging up at once. Boom, 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 boom. 4 interference matrices, 6 interference matrices fly out. They nullify all of the tanks of Clem. And now it is Marine tank for Oliveira fighting against just Marines from Clem, coming in from really just one angle. And he turns a basically lost game into a miracle and takes game 1 in an amazing performance. Absolutely turns the game completely on its head. That was game 1 of the tournament from Oliveira. And I mean, we should have seen it from that point on, but that was the story of this tournament, turning impossible games into a championship. I didn't appreciate it at the time, because whenever you're casting a game live, you don't have time to do those breakdowns. But like, for him to take a game like that and turn it into a win, I should have recognized that we were onto something special with that, because that was foreshadowing. It was clutch. That was the definition of clutch. Oh.